Good evening and welcome once again to another program of Issues in the News, where we discuss the important events that would have taken place in our country over the past week or so. And I want to begin by welcoming all of our viewers who are joining us on television in Berbice, West Coast Berbice, East Berbice, New Amsterdam, Quarantine Coast, all of you who are joining us on television, welcome once again to another program of Issues in the News. Our viewers and listeners who are joining us on Freedom Radio, welcome once again to another program of Issues in the News. And last but not least, the tens of thousands of you who are joining us on Facebook Live across the length and breadth of Guyana, the Caribbean, North America, Europe, and even further afield. Welcome to another program of Issues in the News. And as I normally would say, I want to invite you to press that share button on your phone. Press that share button on your on your computer, and press that share button on your phone so that your friends can join us and we can have the largest possible audience. And there are so many of you who have joined already. Philip Passad of New York, Terence Melville, Fazim Hanif, Ruki Debedin, Netram Sukmangal, Tularam Muralidhar, Rajendra Mahes. I saw Navi Chan earlier from Canada, Bibi Rahina Ali, Nazlin Rafiq from the United States, Karti Prasad, Stan Vinny watching from New York City, Ravi Singh, Dioram Ram Sarup. Good night to all of you and welcome once again to another program of Issues in the News. If you missed me last week, permit me to extend Happy New Year greetings to all of you, and I wish you a very prosperous, healthy, and very happy and successful 2022. I want to begin on a little sober note by recognizing the vast increase in COVID-19 cases across Guyana, the Caribbean, North America, and indeed globally. From the literature that is coming out of the World Health Organization and the larger countries, it appears as though we have to live with COVID-19. The new strands that are coming out, fortunately, seem to be weaker. The vaccines are working, and hopefully, by this infestation, our bodies will develop the fighting mechanisms, and this virus will become another something close to a flu. We simply have to continue to be cautious. We have to continue to wear our masks. We have to continue to practice healthy hygiene, and we have to hope that we overcome this virus. It's not going anywhere. It's spreading, but fortunately, its impact is not as devastating as it was a few months ago. The antibodies are working, the vaccines are working. Please ensure that you take your booster shots, ensure that you take your vaccines, because this thing is here to stay. And this is how apparently the world will be, at least in the foreseeable future. So I thought that I'll begin by recognizing that it's serious. I'm not trying to trivialize this in any way, but to bring to your perspective the reality of the global village in which we live and the status of this pandemic. It appears as though it is going to be here for a very long time. On this note, I want to announce that at Annandale, East Coast Demerara, 14 Annandale West, East Coast Demerara, the place where I normally meet, we will be having, the Ministry of Health will be spearheading an outreach there where they will be administering booster shots this Saturday beginning at 9 a.m. Beginning at 9 a.m., please assemble at Annandale, East Coast Demerara, 14 Annandale West, East Coast Demerara, south of the public road. You all know the address, the very place that I used to do members of the public meeting before the outbreak of this COVID virus. The Ministry of Health will be taking a team there this Saturday beginning at 9 a.m., where we will be administering vaccines as well as booster shots. Make sure you walk with your relevant documentation. Make sure you walk with your vaccination cards so that the medical personnel can determine whether you are due for the booster or whether you are due for a second shot of the vaccine or whether you are going to be a first timer. Please ensure that you don't waste this opportunity. Please come down there at Annandale this Saturday morning at 9 a.m., Annandale on the east coast of Demerara, where I want to see a large gathering so that the Ministry of Health can have their resources utilized to its maximum. An important development also took place this week. The requisite legal proceedings that would constitute the beginning of the process of appealing the decision, the majority decision of the Guyana Court of Appeal in assuming jurisdiction in the petition filed by Monica Thomas. Those proceedings have commenced, and those proceedings will see an appeal being eventually filed at the Caribbean Court of Justice against the decision of the majority of judges sitting in the Court of Appeal. Just for the purpose of recap, you will recall that 2 of the 3 judges ruled that the Court of Appeal has jurisdiction to entertain an appeal from a decision of Chief Justice George striking out the elections petition on the ground of non-service or bad service. Our contention is that the Court of Appeal has no such jurisdiction. The Court of Appeal, however, overruled our submissions and held that they had jurisdiction, that they have jurisdiction. We indicated at the end of the ruling that we will appeal that decision to the Caribbean Court of Justice. The appeal to the Caribbean Court of Justice requires seeking leave of the Guyana Court of Appeal, and that application for leave at the Guyana Court of Appeal, for the Guyana Court of Appeal to grant leave to appeal to the CCJ, that is what has been filed. That will be heard shortly, and from all indications and based upon precedents set already and the interpretation placed upon the requisite rules of court by the Caribbean Court of Justice, the application to the Guyana Court of Appeal for leave to appeal is an academic one. The Guyana Court of Appeal has no jurisdiction to refuse leave unless, of course, an appeal doesn't lie to the Caribbean Court of Justice. We are satisfied that an appeal lies, so we have to go through the procedural requirement of going before the Guyana Court of Appeal to seek leave first, because that is how the rules of the Caribbean Court of Justice is structured. The leave, as I said, is normally granted. It's not refused. The Caribbean Court of Justice, in judgments handed down prior, has explained that the Guyana Court of Appeal performs what it described as a gatekeeping function, meaning that it can't refuse you entry once you have a right of appeal, but you need to seek leave from the Guyana Court of Appeal. That is the interpretation of the rules of the Caribbean Court of Justice. We have also sought in the very application a stay of execution of the judgment or the ruling of the Guyana Court of Appeal. The effect of that is to prevent the Guyana Court of Appeal from proceeding to hear the appeal until the hearing and determination of the appeal that is filed to the Caribbean Court of Justice. I know it may be confusing, but just listen to me carefully. We are also seeking a stay of execution of the ruling of the Guyana Court of Appeal in order to facilitate the appeal that is going to the Caribbean Court of Justice, because we have to preserve the status quo, or else the Guyana Court of Appeal can make a decision while we are still waiting to appeal to the Caribbean Court of Justice. And the courts normally hold their hands when an appeal is filed to allow the higher court to hear the appeal. The lower court would normally, out of deference and out of reverence, hold their hands. So we expect that an application for a stay of execution would be granted. It is included in our application. The applications were filed one by the Attorney General and the other by the lawyers appearing for Mr. Bharat Jagdev as General Secretary of the People's Progressive Party, Civic. So that is an important development, and I see in the social media comments being made, why not have the petition heard? Why are we pursuing an appeal that in essence would prevent the hearing and determination of the petition? Why is it that we don't want the petition to be heard? What is it that we would like to hide? The truth of the matter is, we would like to hide nothing. We are simply following the law. The law says that if you want to file an elections petition, you have to comply with the relevant rules and regulations and procedure that are required to be followed in relation to the filing of an elections petition. And the petitioners and their lawyers did not do that. And when they fail to do that, it's our legal duty to our client to take that objection and ask for the petition to be dismissed. And that is what we have done. It's not a matter of having something to hide. It's not a matter of not wanting to hear the petition. The petitioners have a duty and an obligation to ensure that they comply with the procedural requirements to allow their petitions to be heard. That is how legal proceedings are done. In any court, in any part of the world, you have to comply with the procedural requirements of the court in relation to the filing of the particular case. And if you have failed to do so, if you are incompetent and you have refused to do so, or you simply don't know what to do, the lawyers on the other side, in an adversarial system like ours, are entitled to take that objection and to ask that your case be struck out for non-compliance with the procedural requirements. That is the law. And that law is not new. That is the law that has been there for nearly 500 years. And we are simply complying with the law, and we are discharging our duties as lawyers to our clients. And people must understand that. You can't walk into a court with your empty hand or with bad paperwork and demand that the judge hears your case. The judiciary and the judicial system and the legal system does not operate like that. You have to comply with the condition precedent to having your case heard. And if you have not done so, the lawyers on the opposing side are entitled to ask that your case be dismissed. And that is what we have done, as we are entitled and qualified to do in accordance with law. So please, let's stop this foolishness about publishing comments that somebody has something to hide. The PPP petition in 2015 suffered a similar fate. We were ready to proceed with our petition, but someone go and file an appeal that was not even supposed to have been filed. And as a result, that petition was never heard. At least this one is being heard. This one is in the court system still, and it's moving upward. The PPP's petition was stuck and left since 2015. So don't come and tell me but we don't want the petition to be heard or we have something to hide. The lawyers who have filed the petition have a duty to ensure that they comply with all the rules and requirements touching and concerning the filing of a petition. And if they have not done so, then we on the other side have a duty to our clients to ask that it be struck out. And we did so, and we provided law to support our arguments, and the judge upheld our objections and struck out the petition. The other side is aggrieved and they have appealed. And we are saying that they have no right to appeal. And we have explained why. And we are convinced that we are right. Because we have 500 years of jurisprudence and law and case law to support us. Even Mr. Ford, after the Court of Appeal ruled in the way that they did, in his comments to the press, I heard him say that it was a historic ruling. Historic ruling because it was the first time, according to him, and he's right, it was the first time that a Court of Appeal is taking jurisdiction in an elections petition that has been dismissed on preliminary grounds. The Court of Appeal has a jurisdiction to hear a case, an elections petition that has been dismissed or granted on its merits. But when it is dismissed on preliminary ground, a Court of Appeal has never taken jurisdiction. And Mr. Ford, in his comments, were correct when he pointed that out. And that is the very case that we are advancing, that there is no basis for the Court of Appeal to have assumed the jurisdiction that they have. But the matter will be finally settled by the Caribbean Court of Justice, and we will know whether the Court of Appeal has jurisdiction or not. I have already spoken at length about that decision. I don't need to repeat it here. I feel compelled also to comment briefly on the internal wranglings taking place in the People's National Congress / APNU, a Partnership for National Unity. Now, the People's National Congress, as I have always said in this program, is an important political party in this country. And therefore, its workings or its wranglings ought to be the subject of public commentary. A large number of Guyanese support that party, whether we like it or not. And therefore, what happens in that party is of national interest. So we have had a leadership battle within the party, and emerging from that leadership battle as the victor was Mr. Aubrey Norton. He defeated the leader of the opposition, Mr. Joe Harmon, and he defeated Mr. Van West Charles. So he is the leader of the PNC. But he is not the leader of the opposition. The leader of the opposition was elected by the opposition at the beginning of the 12th Parliament. The leader of the opposition was obviously put there by the then leader of the PNC, Mr. David Granger. Obviously, things have changed since. And you have now the PNC deciding at an executive meeting that they would like the PNC leader to be the opposition leader. The opposition leader is not prepared to give up his constitutional office lightly. And he says, and it is reported in the public domain, that they will have to talk, and apparently talks are scheduled. But as a matter of law, the leader of the opposition can only be removed from parliament if he resigns, if he's recalled by the leader of his list pursuant to the provisions of Article 156 of the Constitution, or a vote of no confidence is moved against him by members of the opposition. Those are the three instances that the leader of the opposition can leave the parliament. He must do so voluntarily by a resignation. The leader of the list can write to the speaker under Article 156 of the Constitution and say that he has lost, or the party has lost, confidence in that particular member. Or the leader of the opposition can be the subject of a no confidence vote and be removed as leader of the opposition, but not as an opposition member of the National Assembly. So I thought that I would put out what I consider to be the relevant legal principles, and we wait as the events are unfolding. I saw today in the news one member of the APNU saying that the APNU does not exist. Mr. David Hines, who seemed to be representing the Working People's Alliance, has published in the public domain that since August of last year, there has been no interaction between the WPA and the APNU. He further argues that the APNU exists in name only, that it is no longer a coalition. I don't know what that means for the AFC, but the APNU is no longer a coalition. The Justice for All Party is no longer part of it. Jai Paul Sharma has formed his own party and was incorporated back into APNU. And then you have Tabitha Haley. She, I believe, is the founder of her own party as well. And she was handpicked by Mr. Granger in a controversial way and put in APNU. So you have the WPA saying that APNU exists on paper only, and you have these two persons who claim to be leaders of political parties who are part of APNU as well, of course, with the PNC. So we have some important internal political dynamics that are unfolding, and while it is the PNC's business, and I know that my critics will say that, it is also a matter of public importance what goes on in the PNC, because as I said, they are a major political force in this country. Mr. Norton is the leader, as I have said, and he continues to try to clear the murky waters that surround him as leader, and we will have to wait and see how the situation unfolds. It seemed to be a fluid political situation that is changing as the days go by. But we are waiting to see. We are going to have the budget read sometime this month in the National Assembly. So we are going to have a sitting of the National Assembly shortly, and we will see how the configuration takes place there, and then when the National Assembly begins to sit. We also have a number of members of the opposition who may be subject to disciplinary proceedings. and we must not put this on the back burner. This is a very important issue. The way the Parliament handles this matter will determine the respect that the Parliament will demand as an institution of state, as an important arm of government, if it allows its procedure to be ridiculed, if it allows its process to be abused, if it allows its traditions to be trampled upon, then that may very well determine the authority that it continues to wield in the constitutional matrix of our country. What I can say is that parliaments in the past have sanctioned members who have misbehaved, and in particular who have disrespected or debased the authority of the Speaker. The Speaker is the authority in the Parliament, and that authority is symbolized by the mace, and parliaments across the Commonwealth have consistently sanctioned members who have disrespected the mace, who have assaulted the mace, and who have decided to attack the ceremonial power that the mace represents. We await to see Parliament handle this matter. I want to make it clear that this is not a government, an executive government matter. We have already expressed our outrage. We have already expressed our condemnation. We have already expressed our reprimand against those who perpetrated those disgraceful and those outrageous acts in the National Assembly. It is now for that arm of government to decide how it will treat with the miscreants who have misbehaved and disrespected its process, its procedures, and its traditions. We wait to see how that institution of state will assert itself, and whether the ordinary Guyanese will lose respect for the processes of that important institution. Every court and every institution, such as the National Assembly or the Parliament if you wish, has a power to prevent itself and its process from abuse. It's an inherent power that lies in every such institution, an inherent power to protect its process and its procedure from abuse. There is nothing different about this Parliament. We are looking, Guyanese are looking, the Caribbean people are looking, the Caribbean parliaments are looking, and I am sure that our Commonwealth counterparts are looking to see how Parliament will address this very serious breach of its process and procedure. Another important issue that I would like to speak about tonight is the parking meter issue. Now, most of you would recall that in 2018, 2016, the then government, through the mayor and city council, started to introduce this idea of parking meters to be installed in Georgetown, charging exorbitant rates for parking. They enter into an agreement with a company out of Mexico, And eventually, they started the process of implementation. The population of Georgetown became outraged and started massive public protestation against the implementation of this parking meter project as it was described in the media then. You would recall that Mayor Patricia Chase Green, the then town clerk, and I believe the head of the finance committee, Mr. Oscar Clark, jetted off to Mexico and I believe consummated a contract. When the implementation came, difficulties began to arise as the people of Georgetown, including supporters of the PNC and the APNU, began to protest wide and far against the implementation of this project. It was felt at the time, and based upon the media reports, that there was no consultation. It was argued that even if there were consultations, the regime, the financial regime, was one that Guyanese cannot afford. And the parking meter, as far as I can recall, was supposed to have been implemented with the gazetting of certain bylaws that would have introduced the fees to be charged for parking and recorded by these meters that were installed across the length and breadth of of Georgetown, at strategic positions. That did not happen, and we all forgot about the parking meter project. Well, the company that was responsible has not forgotten. The company has filed proceedings in an institution called the International Center for Settlement of Investments Disputes in Washington, D.C., against the government of Guyana. So we are at that International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, taken there by the company by the name of Smart City Solutions. You will recall that's the name of the company that came here. And they are claiming against the government of Guyana $100 million as compensation. Now, this is the type of destruction that APNU AFC left in its wake. Recall, they caused us to be blacklisted when they had a one-seat majority by refusing to support certain amendments to our AML-CFT law. Then they voted down that. We are still recovering from the sanctions that were imposed as a result of our inability to pass those laws. Those memories, I'm sure, are still fresh in your minds. That is why Norton, same very George Aubrey Norton, was turned away from MoneyGram. It's because we are still fetching some burdens, some sanctions imposed from that era because of their non-support of our bills in the parliament to comply with our international obligations in the AML-CFT arena. Recall they also voted down an amendment to our tax law, our customs law, that put us in violation of the Treaty of Chaguaramas, and we had to pay Rhodesia of Suriname. some 6 million US dollars in compensation. You would recall they also used their one-seat majority to cut and slash a whole series of budgetary allocations in about 2 or 3 successive years, cutting down the Amila Falls project, cutting down the specialty hospitals, cutting down the Amerindian Development Fund, cutting down a whole set of interior development projects. That is what they used their one-seat majority to do. Then they won the elections and they came into government in that same destructive mode, closing down sugar, putting 7,500 people on the bread line, sugar workers. They damaged our rice markets to Venezuela and elsewhere. Up to now, we can't get money for rice that they sold to Panama. They destroyed the productive sectors. Then they imposed over 200 tax measures. And then they imposed projects like Durban Park. Only today, the news carry an item that $70 million is still unaccounted for. 70 million Durban Park project. And I can go through the 30,000 jobs that they destroyed. They chased out investors. Bai Shanling was chased out. Barama was closed down. And I can continue to reel off the destruction that they did in this country. And then held the country to ransom for 5 months after they lost the elections. Fast forward a year and a half after, we still now have to fetch another burden. Another burden. We have to hire lawyers in America to defend a contract that they entered into. And the government of Guyana is being sued for $100 million at the International Center for the Settlement of Investments Disputes. This is the kind of destruction that these people have done. And then you saw their behavior again in the National Assembly just a week ago. My friend, I don't know what is wrong with this bunch, but I have just recited for you a litany of real events and the multi-dimensional destruction that they have caused to the economy of this country and to the welfare of our people. And these people are still around, and they are still clamoring for power. And sometimes we forget. Sometimes we forget. We have shallow memory in this country. But these are the times where we have to be reminded of the destruction. Now, this is invaluable taxpayers' dollars that we will have to now spend in defending a claim. And APNU and AFC and APNU and PNC are living their merry life. They don't have anything to do with this. They just washed their hands off of it and left this burden with us to carry. And that is what they have always done. After government for 28 years, they left a bankrupt country with the largest per capita debt in the world, had destroyed the economy, had destroyed infrastructure, leaving us as the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. That is how they left us after 28 years. And we have to build, and we have to rebuild, and we have to develop, and we have to continue. And yet they are there in their destructive elements, ready to destroy at any given time, once given the opportunity to. Throughout our government, after every elections, they cause mayhem and destruction in this country. I just digress a little to remind people of what this bunch is capable of and what their track record is. Because sometimes we forget. And these are the moments where we have to be reminded. Remember, those who forget their past are bound to repeat it. So I hope that I have said a mouthful there that would jolt the memories of some of us who are listening. And the slightest thing that the PPP does, it's a big issue in all the newspapers. You have the man there at Kaichor News every single day. I understand yesterday he abused me, but that's okay. I have to do what I have to do. And part of what I have to do is to remind people, remind you of the dangers that are lurking right outside there, right outside the government, waiting to pounce upon the state and upon the state's resources once they're given an opportunity to. On a little more positive note, last year I spoke a lot about establishing the relevant the relevant arbitration infrastructure in Guyana. Unfortunately, not much was accomplished. A consultant was hired and not much was accomplished. Let me say that because we have to move on. This year, I intend to vigorously pursue the enactment of a modern arbitration bill. I already have a draft. It's a CARICOM model, a 2022 model. Guyana may be the first country in the region that would be implementing the model. It is the most modern arbitration bill in the hemisphere, endorsed by CARICOM as a model legislation. We have retained another consultant, this time one who is experienced and recommended by our partners who are working with us at the level of CARICOM, and an entire program is being planned to unfold this arbitration initiative in Guyana in a railway, and that will be done this year. We are going to include the private sector. We are going to include the Bar Association. We are going to the legal profession. We are going to include as far as possible, the oil companies, AmCham, so that we have a buy-in. We have a buy-in from the important stakeholders, because this project will not be able to work without the buy-in from both the legal profession as well as the private sector. Also, the judiciary will have to play a significant role, and they will be engaged as well. We are working with international arbitration institutions who will assist us with training. There's an institute out of Guadeloupe who we are approaching to help us to guide us through the process. But we are going to have training, certificates training. We may collaborate with the University of Guyana to ensure that we have training programs that will be of high quality, where we'll bring in persons from the international arbitration community and international arbitrators to train our cadre here, because we have to build capacity. One of the most important things about arbitration is to not only educate your professionals, but to build a nucleus of arbitrators while building the infrastructure necessary. Our first target will be local in terms of the companies operating here, but it's a much larger vision. We want to make Guyana, as I've said before, a seat or a hub for arbitration for South America, for the Caribbean, for Latin America. And that is the vision. So you will hear a lot from me within the next couple of weeks. A small unit is being established as I speak that will bring together the legal profession, the Attorney General's office, other sectors in government, as well as the private sector, whose role is so important. And that unit, under the supervision of consultants, will chart the way forward. And hopefully, by August of this year, we should be a far way in completing the establishment of formal modern arbitration in Guyana. I'm going to push this agenda as hard as possible to ensure that we meet this deadline, because it's something that is in keeping with our local content objectives, ensuring that arbitrations are not taken overseas, ensuring that arbitrations, in particular in relation to the oil and gas sector and other major sectors in the country, are done right here. So our first idea is to make us modern and self-sufficient, and then start to branch off and market our product across the region and across South America. So I thought that I will speak a little about that because I consider it very important for the resolution of commercial disputes in Guyana, and we must be able to do so with speed, with competence, and with a high degree of integrity. This year also, we are going to start the constitutional reform process. It was stymied last year because of COVID and a number of other matters, but I have already requested the National Assembly Committee's division to fix a date for a meeting to be scheduled of the Constitutional Standing Committee on Constitutional Reform. And from there, the process will begin to achieve momentum, and we will have constitutional reform and all the Article 13 and all these organizations that are making all these grand and big pronouncements. I hope that they will participate in the process so that we can have a healthy consultative exercise in relation to constitutional reform, and the exercise can produce some solid recommendations that we can go forward with. Let me pause here to look at the phone a little. A lot of persons are writing. Ramdat, Roshandat, Bibi Rehana, Ali, thank you government for great work. So thank you very much for continuing to look. I'm hoping that I can get some comments or questions that I can address whilst I'm watching. Any indication of arbitration taken overseas currently, and what is the cost to taxpayers? Arbitration is being taken overseas. I just cited the parking meter experience as one where the arbitration is being done overseas. A lot of the contracts that I have had the opportunity of looking at, modern contracts in Guyana, huge contracts, they contain arbitration clauses that take the arbitration to other parts of the world, the major arbitration centers of the world, London, Switzerland, France, New York, Malaysia is now regarded as a arbitration capital. So yes, The answer to that is yes. Um, why is this program not on VOG and NCN? Henry, thank you. I think it's rebroadcast on one of those television channels. I'm not sure. I am sure. I think it is. It is. I will find out though. That's a good question. I'll follow up to ensure that it is broadcast. Remember the program with the police and these stops? Yes, I have to do a program in which I will detail the law in relation to police and detention, arrest and detention, arrest and false imprisonment. I need to do a program in which I'll address some of those issues. What is the status with the return of catfish to the U.S.? I know that that work is being done by our agriculture ministry on that issue, but I can find out and get an update. What becomes of the James Bond case, land deal? That case is still before the magistrate's court. A special prosecutor has been appointed, and I know that I spoke to the prosecutor quite recently on a different matter, so I know that these cases are going ahead. But I agree with you, they're taking some time. Persons continue to ask me about this Ponzi scheme, Uri and the Ponzi scheme. What can I say about Uri and his Ponzi scheme? I said that this thing happened when we were in the opposition. I brought it to the police's attention. The police have instituted some 300 fraud charges against Uri. We tried with we tried with the banking system to find out where this money, if it was sent out from the Guyana banking system. We found no traces of the money being sent through the banking system, so I don't know where the money is. It is unreasonable to hold government responsible when at the time when you were going to invest your money with Uri, you never sought my advice. You never sought the PPP's advice. We were not in government. You are lucky that we came into government at the appropriate time and we were able to stop the scheme. That much you should be thankful for. But if you were swindled, so be it. It happens all over the world. The man is charged and he's before the court. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing government of Guyana can do. The man has no assets, none at all, not even a vehicle in his name. So please stop asking me about Uri. I don't have nothing to do with Uri. Sometimes I get the impression as though I am being held responsible for what Uri has done with people's money. You went voluntarily and gave a con man your money, and the man conned you. It's as simple as that. It may be a hard pill to swallow. Government can't. What do you want us to do? Squeeze the man to death? The man doesn't have any money. He doesn't have any assets. At least not in the traditional legal system doesn't reflect anything. The title deeds, the deeds registry doesn't have a property in his name. The GRA don't have a vehicle registered in his name. So that is the reality. So please stop asking me about Uri and where is Uri and what is going on with Uri's scheme. Uri's scheme was a fraudulent one. And I made that point over and over again. And the victims of fraud, all you have to do, hopefully you have to go to the court and give the evidence and convict him. He said that he has been repaying people. I don't know. I read that somewhere in the newspapers. If that is being done, well, ensure that you are part of that repayment scheme. That's all I can say. That's all the government can say. Anyhow, my operator is signaling that we are approaching program time. I want to thank you very much for spending the last hour with me. I think we have covered a number of important issues. I hope that I have brought to your attention a number of vital issues of public importance. We have to continue to have this discourse. I invite you to join me next week where I will resume and we will have other issues to discuss, and I'll update you on the national development and on the political development of our country. This show, as I said to you, has a large political and legal content with some degree of national development interjected or injected into it. Thank you very much, and please enjoy the rest of the week. Stay safe. Remember, our vaccination program is continuing at Annandale this Saturday, 14 Annandale West. The Ministry of Health will send a team there and they will be administering the booster shots. Remember, before you get the booster shots, you must satisfy the medical personnel that you have the 2 doses of vaccines, as the case may be, and sufficient time would have expired to qualify you to get the booster shot. So you have to walk with your vaccination cards or whatever documents you have. I hope that I see large numbers of you. As I said, the COVID is still with us. Fortunately, the strain that is now here is not as destructive as the initial COVID attack that we endured and that caused many deaths. Not that deaths are not taking place. Deaths are taking place right across the world, including Guyana. But I believe that the human system is beginning to cope better with the new strands that are out. Thank you very much, and please enjoy the rest of the evening and stay safe. I will see you next week on this program. Thank you.